Hello, everybody. Thanks for watching The Spirit of Vinyl. My name is Craig. I'm your host for the week, or every week as it goes. I hope you all had a wonderful time out picking records and looking around and finding stuff and listening to your favorite vinyls this week. And hopefully you really enjoyed what you were hearing and maybe disappointed with something you picked up. I don't know if you've ever been disappointed with anything you picked up. That's something I want to talk to you about here real quick. The only record I've ever been disappointed with is the ones that I didn't buy. You don't regret the records that you buy, right? You don't regret the records that you buy. You only regret the ones that you're like, oh, I'll get it next week. And then you go next week and it's not there anymore. So hopefully you didn't pass on anything that you're going to regret later and everything went well for you this week. As for me, I added more records to the collection this week. Let me show you what happened. So I work for a trash industry, which you all know. If you've watched the first episode, you understand how I came across a lot of these records. Well, you know, the people I work with, it's kind of gotten around, obviously, that I'm a record collector. So people are always looking for records for me, which is nice. I get shit that I don't necessarily want and would never have bought, but, you know, like this week, for example, I've got this stack of records here. I'll just go through them real quick. That one of our guys who works at the transfer station loading stuff, saw a box of records, pulled them off to the side and saved them for me. So when I came in to dump my truck, he's like, hey, I got records for you. So Kenny Rogers, Gambler, Eagles on the Border, which I already had a copy of. So now I have two. Crystal Gale. All these are still in shrink wrap. They look really good. Best of the Doobies still has this $6.99 price tag on it. I have a copy of this already. Eagles Long Run, so now I have multiple copies of that. My first Seals and Cross album came in here. The Pure Prairie League, I'm not sure who these people were, but I did look it up, and Vince Gill does play some of the music on here. I said none of this music is my style at all. And Moody Blues album, and an Allman Brothers album, which, I mean, this is fucking cool looking. Check out this inner cover. This thing's awesome. They're all in fairly decent shape, especially for basically records that were found in the garbage. So you can't complain. Like I said, I never would have bought any of these titles ever. I never would have bought any of these titles. And that's the wonderful thing about vinyl records. You know, I found those ones in the dumpster and there's stuff in there I never would have bought. But then you listen to it and you're like, holy shit, this band's actually pretty fucking good. I'm going to buy more of their records. So maybe that'll happen here. I don't know. You know, you got to be in the mood for things like the Moody Blues and, you know, Kenny Rogers and the Allman Brothers. But, you know, and I'm not a big fan of country music. So that Kenny Rogers, you know, my wife likes country, so it'll be played and it'll remind me of the time when I was a kid. You know, the Gambler and all that stuff was pretty big. You know, all that shit was on the radio all the time. My parents were listening to it and everything else. So that's kind of what I picked up this week. I picked up a couple other things from a record store, but I'm going to talk about that at all this week. What we're here to talk about this week's album that I have chosen to discuss is the multi-platinum, triple platinum album Cinderella Long Cold Winter. This album came up, I played the other day, and it was fucking great, and I had to talk about it. This is a music on vinyl re-release from May 9th of 2016. Originally, Long Cold Winter was released in July of 1988. I just picked this up about 3 months ago at my local record store. And, you know, Cinderella is one of those bands from the 80s that is actually a really fucking good band. This one came with this cool little insert. It's got a picture of the band on one side. On the back, it's got lyrics and thank you notes and all that came in the music on vinyl. Came with the music on vinyl release. This label, there's the label for it right there. I don't know if you can tell, but the record is basically near mint. Like I said, I just bought it a couple months back. Probably played it 3 or 4 times. So it's basically brand new. Had this plain inner sleeve, but at least it's got the plastic in it, so I didn't have to replace it with one of my own. I like that with the music on vinyl. So at least they put decent sleeves inside instead of just paper bullshit. So, what can you say about Cinderella's Long Cold Winter? Well, I got to say, it's probably one of the best blues style rock albums I've ever heard in my life. I mean, this is some bluesy stuff. It's got these great songs on it. Bad Seamstress Blues, Falling Apart at the Seams, Gypsy Road, Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone, Last Mile, Second Wind, Side 2 starts with Long Cold Winter. If you don't like it, Coming Home, Fire and Ice, and Take Me Back. I mean, these are all fucking hits, right? Like, there's 4 or 5 hits on this record that you hear on the radio still to this day. And it sounded great. The music on vinyl people put an excellent job in re-releasing and repressing this album. I've got no complaints at all. You know, it was probably $25 or $30. I looked it up on Discogs. It's worth around $40. I've got this one listed at near mint or minus, obviously, because it's basically brand new. But the thing is with Cinderella, it takes me back to the time, this first came out in 1988. So it takes me back to that time when I would have been, this is their second album. So the first album I think came out in 86. So I would have been a junior or senior in high school around that time. And Cinderella was one of those glam looking bands, and they're with Bon Jovi and stuff like that. And what I was at that era of my life was more of a thrashy, hard rock, heavy metal guy. We didn't really listen to glam music. We listened to some glam bands that would be considered hair bands now or glam bands back then, but bands like Twisted Sister and Motley Crue, they were darker and they were kind of cool. So that was different than Cinderella or Bon Jovi or Def Leppard or whatever. And I loved all that music, but you weren't super fans, right? We weren't super fans of Cinderella, or we didn't let anybody know we were super fans of Cinderella because you didn't want to be listed as a poser or whatever. So that's the thing with Cinderella in the beginning. But in the beginning, we all liked them, but we just didn't tell anybody. I got a funny story to tell. So I had this stuff on cassette, Night Songs, first, and then Long Cold Winter, and you had it on cassette because everything was on cassette back in those days, pre-CD and all that. Wasn't buying vinyls a whole lot in high school. We were more portable. I would still buy some things on vinyls and just record it in cassette to play in the car. So I had this Cinderella cassette. Me and my buddy are hanging out one day, and he's digging through my dashboard or whatever, my cassette box. And he's like, "You got Cinderella in here?" I'm like, "Yeah, I like it." And he's like, "Yeah, me too." I was like, "You listen to Cinderella?" And this is a guy I saw like every day. He's like, "Oh yeah, but I didn't want to say anything to anybody because, we listen to Slayer and we listen to Megadeth and Metallica and Anthrax and fucking Exodus and shit like that. And when it came to like other music, we were listening to like Rat was cool and, Dio and Ozzy and stuff like that. But we didn't want people to know we listened to Cinderella because they were fucking glam, especially the front cover of the Night Songs album. They hairspray and purple clothes and all that shit. We didn't want anybody to know we listened to glam music. So we kept it quiet. So he was as shocked to see it in my car as I was to find out that he listened to it. And then we just jammed a fucking Cinderella from that point on. And we didn't worry about it. And that's something that you get over as you get older. I don't like this. Well, you really like it, but you don't want people to know you like it because you want them to still think you're cool or whatever. So that's the kind of bullshit we did back in the 80s. But now, Cinderella, I got Night Songs, but this album right here is fucking great. I mean, Night Songs was great too, but this thing sold over 3 million copies, came out in 1988. Like I said, it's bluesy, and Tom Kiefer's voice is excellent for that style of music they play. And I really, really like it. So when I listen to it, it takes me back to those days of, what we would consider mellower stuff to listen to that was more background. It wasn't so extreme, but it was, it's got great lyrics and it's got great guitars and it's mixed really well and it's repressed. This copy is repressed really well. So I looked it up on Discogs. It's around $40. If you don't have a copy of Long Cold Winter by Cinderella, I would go ahead and pick it up. I mean, fuck, I would give it, 4 out of 5 stars, maybe 5 out of 5 stars, depending on my mood. Kiefer's still out there doing it. I think one of the members died a few years back, so there's no chance of a reunion. But from what I understand, Tom Kiefer's still out there killing it, playing Cinderella music, and I guess he sounds great. So if he comes to your town, go check him out. If you see these albums in your record store, these music on vinyl re-releases of Night Songs and Long Cold Winter. I highly suggest you buy them. I got both of them. They both sound great. They're mixed well. They're repressed well. It's heavy duty, 180 gram. It's got that cool old school type Cinderella label on it. It's got the cool logo. I mean, it's a beautiful record all the way through, and it sounds awesome. So yeah, go ahead and pick it up and listen to some Long Cold Winter. Listen to some Cinderella. You won't be disappointed. You won't be unhappy with it. I think you'll all enjoy it. If you're listening to this show, if you're watching me do this, you obviously have a penchant for rock and roll and heavy metal anyway. So you all know who these guys are. If you've listened to any classic rock station for more than 5 minutes, you've heard a Cinderella song. So you're not going to be getting into something you don't know. But the songs that you don't know that aren't radio hits are still just as good as all the radio hits on this record. They're just as good. So go ahead and give it a pick up. Enjoy yourself. Listen to some Cinderella. Keep rocking out. Have a good time. I hope everybody has a great time. Everybody stay safe out there. Thanks you all for listening. If you do like what I'm doing, go ahead and like and subscribe. I know faux pas YouTube rule to not ask for likes and subscriptions, but I mean, fuck it, whatever, I'm going to do what I want to do. So go ahead, like and subscribe if you like. Leave comments or whatever. I really appreciate it. It would really help me out. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Spirit of Vinyl. My name is Craig. I've been your host, and thank you once again for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.